Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Dmytro Kuleba. He is Ukraine's foreign minister. He joins us from Malabo, the capital of Equatorial Guinea. He's on his way to Liberia to drum up support for his country in Africa. This as Russian President Vladimir Putin is about to host a summit with African leaders in St. Petersburg. Thank you very much for being with us.
It's my pleasure.
Following Russia's decision to halt the Black Sea grain initiative, we're witnessing Russian strikes on Ukraine's Black Sea ports, such as Odessa, but also on the Danube River in places like Reni. So what, in your eyes, is Russia's objective?
Well, it's very simple. Russia's objective is to provoke the increase of global food crisis, export its own grain without any hindrances, and benefit from it, make as much money as they can. The problem is in this strategy is that the people of Ukraine and the people of Africa are paying the price for this vicious strategy of President Putin, because our grain is not being exported, our infrastructure is being destroyed, and ordinary people across Africa will have to pay more for bread and other food because of the rising food prices. And Russia will fill its pockets with money to finance war machine at the expense of Africa. This is what is happening.
Right. The Russian strikes took place very close to the border of Romania. Romania is obviously a NATO member. We also heard recently Vladimir Putin warn Poland, another NATO member. What are we seeing? Is the war in Ukraine broadening and, in effect, could become a war between NATO countries and Russia?
Well, Putin attacked the port of Reni on Danube because it was very efficient piece of infrastructure for exporting Ukrainian grain, and he wants to destroy that infrastructure as well. The fact that this port is rested right on the border with Romania speaks for a simple fact that he's testing the reaction of NATO, and NATO has to react firmly and decisively in response to this. 2 weeks ago in Vilnius, we had discussions on the future membership of Ukraine, and the unspoken argument was that we shouldn't provoke Russia. Ukraine was against this argument, but now we see clearly that Russia does not need to be provoked. It acts according to its own logic and conducts devastating attacks and provocations.
Right. In the Black Sea, Moscow has warned that civilian ships sailing close to Ukrainian ports could be seen as military targets. So this begs the question, does Ukraine in turn consider Russian ships heading to Russian or Russian-occupied Black Sea ports as legitimate targets?
Yes, Ministry of Defense of Ukraine issued relevant statement basically saying the same thing as you just mentioned, that Russian ships, wherever they are in the Black Sea, become legitimate target in response to respective Russian official statement.
Right. I want to go back to the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Russia has decided to pull out. President Zelensky said, nevertheless, he was hoping to revive it. Is this still possible, given Russia's decision to pull out and the developments we just discussed?
Everything is possible. This is what we learned over the last year and a half of the war. So we will keep trying, reviving this Black Sea Grain Initiative together with the United Nations and Turkey. At the same time, we're conveying the message that if this effort fails, we have to come up with an alternative way of exporting Ukrainian grain by the sea, because it's essential to put prices down. I would like to recall that last year, after the Black Sea grain deal was introduced, prices dropped by 23%, global food prices, 23%, and this is UN data. So it's essential to restore sea route. And on a parallel track, we will be working with the European Union to ensure the proper functioning and expansion of solidarity lanes, which is export of grain by land corridors.
Right. Vladimir Putin has vowed that Russia would supply Africa with the same amount of grain that was delivered under the Black Sea Grain Initiative. And there are reports in the Financial Times that he had proposed an initiative whereby Qatar would pay Moscow to ship Russian grain to Turkey, which would then distribute the crop to Africa. Do you think this is what's in the works?
Yes, we heard of Russian attempts to propose this kind of deal. I think it will be shameful for any country to take part in such an arrangement, which Russia is making as a result of violation of its own international commitments, destruction of ports of a sovereign country, and blackmailing the whole world with food crisis and hunger. And the fact that Russia is openly saying that they are ready to compensate the absence of Ukrainian grain on the market speaks exactly for what I mentioned earlier in the interview. They want to make money. They want to make more money benefiting from higher prices provoked by their own actions. And the last point on this is never exclude that part of the grain that Russia will be selling to the world is not Russian. It's Ukrainian grain stolen from the occupied territories.
Right. So have you conveyed to Turkey, which was obviously very involved in the Black Sea Grain Initiative, that any attempts to deal with Russia for an alternative solution is not acceptable for Ukraine?
We are in communication with all sides, and except Russia, on this matter, and they all understand the nuances and the complexity of this issue.
Right. At the first Russia-Africa summit back in 2019, there were over 40 African heads of state and governments. There's another summit to be held this week. You have been in Africa 3 times in the past month. Are you telling leaders not to attend this St. Petersburg summit for symbolic reasons?
Well, it's a sovereign decision of every country whether to take or not to take part in the summit. We do not interfere in that. We respect decisions of every country based on their national interests. But what I explain to my counterparts in all African countries is that President Putin will be using this summit as a whitewashing instrument for his reputation. He wants to improve his reputation after all the crimes he has committed, and he will not be focused on cooperation being beneficial for both Russia and Africa. He will be focused on propaganda purposes.
Right. Speaking of Russia's presence in Africa, there's a lot of talk about the Wagner Group. Are you gathering information about Wagner moving more and more into Africa and sharing it with your African counterparts?
Well, I wouldn't go in each and every detail of our conversations in Africa, but definitely Wagner Group is of particular interest not only for African nations but also for us, and we possess a valuable amount of information that can help African countries strengthen their security.
Right. You mentioned the importance for Ukraine to be able to export its grain. There's a problem with several Eastern European countries that are blocking your exports. This is supposed to end on September 15th, but those countries, Poland, Bulgaria, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania, want to extend this. Is this acceptable given what's happening in the Black Sea?
It is unacceptable, and it goes the demand coming from certain countries to extend the application of EU restrictions beyond 15th of September also goes against their own interests. And we should also be mindful about the fact that one of the reasons why Russia is destroying Ukrainian agriculture grain infrastructure is because they want to provoke additional tensions between Ukraine and respective neighbors. And we should not play into the hands of Putin. We should not play his game. And we are working closely with our partners and friends, neighbors, to avoid the situation when Putin will be sitting and laughing in Kremlin, observing how, for example, Poland is or other countries insisting that Ukrainian grain should not enter their countries.
So you're still hoping to get a positive response by September 15th?
Well, that's a job of a diplomat, to be hopeful and to deliver on hope.
Right. Speaking of deliver, on July 14th, the chief of staff of Ukraine's president, Andriy Yermak, said that the U.S. is, quote unquote, very close to deciding whether to provide Ukraine with the long-range ATACMS missiles. However, the Washington Post reported this Sunday that the Biden administration is actually still refusing to deliver those missiles to Ukraine. The Pentagon saying that, Ukraine has other needs, essentially demining. Do you agree with that assessment? Is demining a much bigger priority than those long-range missiles or the F-16 fighter jets, for that matter?
We are definitely interested in receiving ATACMS missiles, but I also have, for the sake of clarity and justice, I have to say that we are receiving long-range missiles already from other countries, such as the United Kingdom and France. So this is not the item that we do not have in our possession. We need more, but in principle, we have it. While it is critically important now to provide Ukraine with more demining vehicles and instruments, because the Ukrainian army is conducting its counteroffensive through heavily mined fields. So yes, this is a very topical need. F-16s, well, it's solved. It takes time. We're in the process, but this deal is done. And we will keep working on ATACMS missiles, but we understand the logic of Washington on this matter.
Right. Just as a conclusion, to be able to conserve a sea lane to export, you will need actually patrolling from the sea and probably from the skies. I mean, this is the key, right?
Absolutely. If we have F-16s, we will not depend on Russian blackmail in exporting Ukrainian grain to global markets. So the sooner we receive them, the sooner we will be able to launch a new corridor, protected, efficient, that will function without any hindrances, and millions of tons of Ukrainian grain will make it to the global market, stabilizing prices, lowering them, helping people to avoid famine, and most importantly, depriving Russia of its blackmail leverage on the world.
Dmytro Kuleba, I want to thank you very much for appearing here on the France 24 interview from Equatorial Guinea. And thank you all for watching it. Stay tuned for more news.